Good afternoon. This is Jim with Absolute Control's Irrigation Specialists. I want to welcome you to our channel, another episode of Tips from the Swamp. In this video, I'm going to be going back in history, looking at the early central control unit used by Rainbird, the SBM. It was a mechanical clock based on the RC mechanical clock series that had a series of printed circuit boards mounted to the back which would override the mechanical functions of the clock. On the back of the unit there was a printed circuit board. There was an older version and a newer version. I am demonstrating both of those here. The older version can be identified by the fact that it had a dip switch setup which only had 5 switches. And these switches are used to set the station ID for the central. It worked on a binary code system where switch number 1 represented a 1, switch number 2 was double that, so that would be a number 2. Switch number 3 was double of the number 2 switch, so that would make that a 4. Number 4 switch was a double of the 3rd, which makes that an 8. And the final 5th one was a double of the 4th, which was 8, which makes that a 16. So to identify this clock as satellite 21, we would turn on the number 1. We would turn on the middle, which is 4, so 4 plus 1 is 5. Then we would turn on the final switch down here, which is 16 plus 5, which gives you 21. That's how you arrive at satellite ID. If you wanted this to be satellite ID number 3, you would turn on switch number 1 for 1, switch number 2, which should be 2 plus 1 makes that 3. Or if you wanted it to be satellite ID number 4, you would just turn on the 3rd switch, which represents the 4. That's how you set up satellite IDs for the older style circuit board using dip switches on their binary code. On the newer communication board, you have several more dip switches involved. The last 3 are marked mode select. Those 3 all need to be in the off position. And again, the top 5, if you're going to 21, would be 1 there, 4 there makes it 5, and 16 plus 5 makes it 21. Make sure the mode switches are off. This is now satellite ID 21. Okay. I'm going to set these aside. We're going to now look at the mechanical clock itself. The mechanical clock is made up of 3 major components on the front. You have one dial here, which is an hour dial, which keeps the correct time of day. The pins that you see on here are push in and push out. Those are used to set the time of day where you want this unit to water. I've left all of these out because I'm going to be doing some setup on this clock and some adjustments that require those to be out. You have a dial down here, which is a day dial, which represents a 2-week period. It's a 14-day dial. And again, you pull the pin out on the days you don't want to water, push the pin in on the days you do want to water. The 3rd major component is this turret, which has station timing knobs on it. And these knobs represent 0 to 30 minutes, depending on where you set them. And to set them, it's just a matter of turn them to the setting that you want. In this particular case, I have set all the knobs except station 1 and 2 to off. Station 1 and 2 are set for a minimum time, which usually runs somewhere between 7 to 10 minutes. These clocks were not, they were within 10% of accuracy on time. There's also an on-off switch down here. If it's in the auto position, this clock will operate as it's supposed to, both from the central or from the standalone mode. If this is in the off position, this clock will not operate. And at the top here, there's a switch marked Maxi and SBM. If you have it in the SBM mode, it will ignore any signals from the central control, and it will operate as a standalone clock, similar to a RC clock. If you put this switch in the Maxi mode, it will receive signals from the central based on the ID number that you put in and respond to signals from the central for that station ID and cause this thing to turn its turret to the different stations that you have programmed in the central. I always suggest that you want to put time on these station knob turrets, even though it's ignored if it's running from central. Also set up the day dial so it's at the correct day, and you have days you want a water pushed in. Set the hour dial to the correct hour and set a start time that you would desire if this clock was not running from central. Reason for that is in the Maxi position. If this clock loses communication from the central, what will happen is it will revert back to its SBM standalone mode and run based on whatever program is set in this clock. So that way, if you lost your central control, it would still operate, it would still water. One of the things to remember, this is an older clock. Parts for this clock are no longer available from the factory. So it's difficult to find ways or people that can repair these units. We at Absolute Control recognize that this could become a problem, and over the years we have collected parts for these units, or we've collected entire units that we can use for parts. As different courses have updated their systems and removed these, they have given them to us to have as parts. Parts that are important on these. If I turn this up on its side, you will notice that there's a timing motor here. That's your station timing. That if it's running standalone, that'll time out each station. Back behind here is another motor. This is your clock motor, which keeps the correct time of day. And on this side over here, you see the rapid advance motor. That's what advances this from station to station. Also inside this unit, there's a series of gear shaft assemblies. Here, there's one here, there's one back in here that this advance motor turns so that it can move from station to station. One of the things to be aware of, which is not uncommon, is this clock will go active, or you try to activate it. You hear the timing motor functioning, or not the timing motor, sorry, the advance motor functioning. You can look inside, you see this gear back in here moving, trying to advance this turret, but the turret is not rotating. That is an indication that the gear shaft assembly back in here, which drives this turret, has a clutch mechanism which has failed. The clutch mechanism is a plastic clutching mechanism with a series of plastic fingers in it. And as they get older, they get brittle. What happens is the fingers break out and the clutch mechanism can no longer turn this dial, and it needs to be replaced. Again, these are parts that are not readily available from the factory. However, we at Absolute Control Irrigation Specialists do have parts that we use for our repairs, so we can repair your timer. So be aware of the fact that if it's not, it tries to turn it, but you hear it, but it's not turning this turret, then we have a situation where more than likely that gear shaft assembly has failed. It's one of the most common failures on this clock. Now, in the standalone mode, switch in the automatic position, day pins in for day. When it reaches, or if you would like to check it, if you reach behind here, there's a micro switch. If you activate that micro switch, this turret should move to the first station, as it did there. Now I'm going to advance it past so it carries all the way through. Now, when it comes back up to rest, it should stop. And the reason it's going to stop is because the pins up here are pulled out. If the hour pin were in and the day pin were in, and it were running an automatic function, you need to make sure that the amount of accrued time on these station turrets is at least 20 minutes. If you run one station for 5 minutes, it'll finish that 5 minutes and it'll cause this turret to advance, and it will advance back to rest before this micro switch up here is cleared, and it will stop at rest. It'll continue back on to the first station. So it needs station timing time of at least 20 minutes to allow this dial to turn far enough for that micro switch to clear. Now, there are 3 micro switches on this clock. There is one right here directly behind the hour dial. There's a duplicate of this behind the day dial. That needs to be set so that when the pin is pushed in, it will advance, push this arm, and allow this thing to start. To make that adjustment, there's a screw here and a slot. Just loosen the screw, move this in and out until it's in the correct position, then tighten that up. On the station timing side, again, there's a micro switch on a bracket with this screw that's used for adjustments. I'm going to back this screw off right now so I can demonstrate the correct setting for that micro switch. To make that setting, what you need to do is make sure that the clock is in the rest position. Check and make sure that it's not functioning. So now we're in the rest position. I'm going to now activate the micro switch for the hour dial. My day pins are in, and you'll notice it starts and then stops. Well, when it stops, we want to turn this screw until the turret starts to turn, and then give it another half a turn to put it in the correct position. And now it's in the correct position and timing. We can check it against the number 2 position and let it advance all the way through till it gets back to rest. Now if you check it, if you pull up on that micro switch, it will advance, go to the first station, and time out. If you want to check the timing function, you can let it sit and time out. The minimum timing is about 5 to 7 minutes, sometimes as long as 10. The clock is only about 75 to 80% accurate on timing, so it's not exact. Once it finishes timing there, it'll advance to the next one with time set on it, which in this case is number 2. Once it has timed that one out, it will continue to the next one, which I have at 0. I have everything at 0, so it'll go back to the rest position. Remember on this clock, if it will time one station, it will time them all. There's only one motor involved, one micro switch setting, one advanced motor. So everything should operate the same. If you should have issues with it, potentially gear shaft assembly, motor assembly, or there's a wafer switch stack that's back in here, should those be of an issue, Again, we are able to repair them. Those parts are not readily available. However, we do have an inventory of those parts so that we can repair them. If you'd like us to repair your clock, contact us and we'll be happy to take care of it for you. I hope you enjoyed the video and that it was helpful. Give it a thumbs up. If you like it, please subscribe to our channel so you do not miss any new videos. We also appreciate your comments and suggestions. Remember, we will provide you a shipping label and we promise a quick turnaround on all repairs. Visit us on our website at www.absolute-control.com. Thank you from Gator with tips from the swamp at Absolute Control Irrigation Specialists Incorporated.